The following is a conversation I had with Palantir Daily from Twitter, and trust me when I say this is not something you want to miss as a Palantir investor. I think we've stumbled upon something truly incredible when it comes to Palantir being all that it claims to be, the most important and eventually hopefully valuable software company in the world. We discuss many things: Palantir's business plan, the rumored Tesla partnership, why it should happen when it could happen, and more on Bitcoin and network effects. Enjoy. Welcome back, everyone. I am joined today with Palantir Daily, and we're going to have a pretty exciting discussion, I feel, because as we all know, there is a few rumors that Palantir is working with Tesla, and I think that's one of the most exciting partnerships that Palantir could possibly have for a number of reasons. We'll get into that. We'll get into why Palantir Daily calls himself convinced, pretty much, that Tesla and Palantir are working together, and we'll get into a whole myriad of other things involving Palantir's contracts. So here is Palantir Daily. Let me just show his Twitter account right here, which would be the main place to follow him. I'll just have him introduce himself.
First off, thank you for having me on the channel. I am the man behind Palantir Daily. I started following them, early last year. Kind of took interest to it with the whole COVID thing going on. Had a lot of extra time. And, really just kind of liked the mystery behind it and digging down and learning more about it. So that's what led me here.
Great. And there's that whole thing about Kramer calling it a black box, but I think many people are hesitant to invest. I think that is a hesitation for many people, which is unfortunate because there is a lot of public information available if you do take the time and dive into it. But what are your thoughts just initially on the hesitation to invest because it is more of a closed off, at least when it comes to public relations for some things?
Oh, I mean, I think it's absolutely fair for, people to think that. Because you shouldn't be investing in things that you don't understand. You should do due diligence and know a lot of pretty much everything about the businesses that you're investing in. So I think it's a fair opinion to have, but it's a competitive advantage for us and more of a reason for us to invest now, because in my opinion it's more of a better time for us to invest now, because most people don't understand it. They don't understand, how everything's going to change. They don't understand the company, because you do have to do a lot of research. Palantir doesn't make it very easy to understand their business, but they're not hiding anything. So long that you're willing to kind of read through the lines and do in-depth research, I think it's a great time, for you and I and the community really to invest.
Yeah, and I love that idea about the opportunity. We'll kind of get going with our discussion soon, but I think there really are so many ways to learn about the company, and many people are behind the company and the stock and supporting the mission. So whether it's Twitter, like users such as yourself, or Reddit, there are so many people on there with the breaking news or whatever news it is. There really are ways to stay connected, or it could be YouTube as well. So I don't think it's necessarily an excuse, but definitely don't be investing in something you don't fully understand. So with that out of the way, we'll also say our disclaimer that this is not financial advice. This is more on the speculative side. And while I do believe what we will be sharing is accurate, and this should not be taken as advice either way for the stock, and you should make your own opinions before doing anything of the like. Again, I'm invested in long shares for Palantir. And what about yourself?
Yeah, I have the majority of my position is shares, and then I do have a couple LEAP contracts expiring 2 years from now.
Gotcha. All right, so let's get started. I wanted to initially talk about how Palantir's contracts work, at least commercially. This is kind of the strength behind the business. I talked with Jake Yu yesterday on the Foundry expansion and how that's ultimately going to drive the stock and the revenue and the top line over the next 2 years. So let's just touch on initially, before we get into any sort of speculation about potential contracts with big companies that Karp has been alluding to in the future. So let's just talk about the acquire, the expand, and scale phases. So I'm under the impression that a partnership, be that a contract for the most part. We saw a partnership with Data Robot and another company that I'm forgetting the name of right now, where it was not a contract, but rather working together to integrate the product into Palantir's ecosystem. So today we're talking about partnerships that actually involve contracts where a company is paying Palantir for the right to use a license of Palantir Foundry. You've probably heard of the acquire, expand, and scale phases. I've talked about it before. It is the business plan pretty much behind Palantir. They want to attract a client, expand it throughout an organization, and then scale it and ultimately launch. And that's, I believe, where we will see an official announcement once Palantir has reached that point of scale. Perhaps it's in between the expand and scale phases that we get an official press release from Business Wire or investors.palantir.com. But I believe it's probably more on the later end of that. So I'll kick it on over to you. But first, I want to say there is a considerable amount of time in between when you acquire a client and when you actually get to scale them up, move them out throughout the organization, and make sure the platform is functioning properly. So I do think there is a lot of time from a rumor until the actual partnership is fully announced. So I'm not too worried about any of these rumors being completely fake, because I do think there is a little wiggle room in between a potential truthful rumor and the eventual announcement of a contract. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So you said a lot there. How I view everything is I personally believe Palantir looks at all of their clients as partners, and they approach everything as a partnership. During phase one, acquire, I like to explain it as it's like speed dating. So during the acquire phase, Palantir is not only giving the client a chance to vet the software out and the ability and value that Palantir can create, but Palantir is also vetting the client. Palantir doesn't just work with everyone. They're often going to look for the potential value that a client can bring over the long run. And so if during the acquire phase, Palantir does not feel that a client has a long-term, a large enough long-term potential value, because maybe they aren't growing and changing their business model, because most of these businesses now, they're going to have to change in a way to use data to their advantage. And so if they're not creating a bunch of different IoT devices to integrate data, then Palantir is not going to work with them, because ultimately if they don't have very much data, then Palantir is not going to be able to create much value for them. And so during the acquire phase, I don't think at all Palantir is going to advertise this, because again, it's like speed dating. They may choose to move to second phase, which is expand, or they may choose to just shake hands and say, hey, we aren't going to be able to bring value, create value for you, because your business you're not generating data like other organizations are. And so phase two, expand, I believe the easiest way for me to explain this is they're expanding horizontally throughout a business. So during the acquire phase, I believe they have to generate 100,000 in annual revenue for them to move them to phase two if they choose to proceed with the relationship. Phase two, the expand phase, it's all up to them how horizontal they can believe, or how horizontal they can go in a company. Once they feel that they've gone horizontal as far as they can in an organization, then they will choose to go to phase three, which is scale, and they're moving vertically throughout the organization. That is when I believe if the company that they're working with, that they establish that partnership with, if they want to advertise that, then I think they're going to do it during the scale phase, because that ultimately is when I believe that the partner is going to be sub-licensing software, and so it's going to be advantageous for them to announce that partnership as well.
Okay, that's a very good point, because I feel like we often hear from the partner before we hear from Palantir. So we could hear from the official investor relations page on whatever the partner's website is before we actually get an update from Palantir Investor Relations, there does seem to be a delay there, perhaps indicating that you are correct. So I'm just wondering, it does hypothetically, if Palantir is working with many more clients than they have publicly advertised, does that not negatively affect the perception of Palantir? And is that not a disservice to Palantir shareholders? Of course, we do not get to decide that, but I'm just wondering if you think there is a little bit of a disservice to shareholders in that regard.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, maybe a disservice to traders because they care about the short-term value. But for investors, no, because it's better if the clients don't want us to announce the partnership because they think it's viewed as too much of a competitive advantage and competitive edge, then I mean, come on now. That can only be a good thing in the long run. So no, I think yes, for traders it could be bad because you're not getting that instant bump. But for long-term investors, it's absolutely nothing we need to be worried about.
Okay. And also, I was just thinking, do you know if Palantir varies its pricing at all depending on who they're working with, or do you think it's just like a flat rate? I was just wondering if maybe they offer special pricing to some clients and not others. I'm sure it does vary depending on the size of the organization, but do you think they keep that pretty consistent? I know this is just a random thought, but I was just wondering what you think about that.
No, that's a great thought, and it's a good question, and it does have an answer to it. During the acquire phase, often what Palantir did, and they would waive all the fees. They would cover all the fees to acquire the client and show them the value. Now, once the value has been shown, then and Palantir wants to proceed, with the partnership, then the payment, the cost of the software, is in direct relation to the value it creates. So if a client like BP, for example, I think they said within the first year of the partnership, they were going to derive almost $1 billion in value. So I think Palantir charges a percentage of that value, and I think that is the same across the board. Now, during the acquire phase, I think if you're a large organization with a giant ecosystem around you currently, because you have the community, Palantir will cover the cost to bring the technology to the community, because then it's easier to grow the users of the software, because you're bringing a technology to a community rather than trying to get a community around the software.
Yeah, so that leads kind of into the purpose of this video. You've done a lot of work with rumors about partnerships with Tesla, and you said you have some AT&T stuff to go over. So I was just thinking as well, we've had Carp. I made a video. It's more speculation than anything else, but Carp did say, we know he's a big fan of retail investors, but he said that if you look at who some of these companies are hiring, if they're hiring a Palantir, someone that has experience with Palantir Foundry, that does mean something. So that's kind of where the speculation has come from. We've heard that BMW, AT&T, US Bank, some of these big companies on the commercial end could be using Foundry, and in some part of the perhaps acquire, expand, or even up to the scale phase, and they do not wish to disclose that. I thought a great place to go next would be discussing the significance of what I want to be the focus of this. We can cover AT&T as well, but the significance of a partnership with Tesla, because I think that would be the greatest partnership that Palantir could possibly have. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Tesla shareholder. I had what I thought was a thought experiment when I was first looking at Palantir, which was what could possibly stop a company from not using Palantir Foundry if they do, if they're a commercial enterprise business, that could possibly incorporate it into their day-to-day operations. So Palantir has defined a potential competitor being any commercial Fortune 500 or even smaller company with the ambition to build the software themselves. So I think naturally the best competitor would be someone with software expertise and the willingness to build it themselves, do it all in-house. And I can't think of a better company more willing and founder led to do that, then would be Elon Musk and Tesla. Of course, we have SpaceX too, but focusing on Tesla here because there has been some more speculation in that regard. I think it's a great thought experiment because Tesla would be the one to solely use their own software because it just makes the most sense for them. But I think that also brings up the other point, which is how is Palantir Foundry not a quicker solution and more easy to integrate? You'll be paying the cost of Foundry for the license, but it works so well across so many industries. How could you not include it in your operations, as I said? So that's kind of how I wanted to open this discussion about Tesla working with Palantir. Now let's switch on over to any sort of evidence for that fact.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. One reason that Tesla would want something like this is because of innovation. You know, Elon Musk has said time and time again, they want to be the fastest to innovate. You can look at, you know, Sandy Monroe, blown away at how fast Tesla is innovating. And so Tesla, they were working with SAP, which is an ERP company, and they weren't innovating fast enough. And so that's when he chose to develop something, to go down this path of developing something in-house that would allow you to move at a drop of the dime. You know, innovate Bitcoin as a payment when Bitcoin's huge. You know, that's how they're able to innovate. You know, these features is because Elon Musk wants that. Now, this is gonna, that kind of will dovetail me off onto what Sankar has said about creating alpha. And you create alpha by allowing the innovation process or implementation process or applications to be created by those in the field, which is what Tesla's doing. So that's why the pair would match ideally, because they have the same understanding. Sankar understands and Palantir understands that when you allow a company to be different and not use the same off-the-shelf software, SAP software, I'm sure, was being used by so many different companies, and Tesla wanted to be more different. They didn't want to be more of the same. They wanted to be more different. And if you can innovate at the drop of a dime, then that allows you to be more different and create more alpha. So I just wanted to kind of, you know, add that in there in response to what you said there.
Great. Okay, so here's a thread that it looks like you put out April 20th. All right, so you said everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I've been convinced that Tesla is using Palantir software. And then you link to this, I believe, hour-long video. I took a look at it a few months ago, I think. But it's basically Jay here is talking about how they had to rewrite, as you were saying, and Elon wanted a completely redone internal ERP system. So that's kind of the kickoff for this. And yeah, let's just take a look at your thread here. Kind of just walk us through what you were thinking here, Elon, on the conference call, and then just everything after that.
Of course. So this is not the actual interview. This is a synopsis done by a gentleman in the Tesla community. The actual interview, you're right, is an hour long. And it is linked in that interview. But essentially, what Jay is going over here is the relationship from when Elon initially tried to recruit him to join Tesla. He didn't join Tesla initially, and then he joined later on when Tesla was struggling with their Model S rollout. And so what he's going through is he's then explaining Elon's vision. So Elon told Jay that he wanted a ERP system developed in-house that would allow innovation on drop of the dime, communication with all the suppliers, everything that basically Palantir does, the ecosystem, allowing everyone to talk together and have security. So when they do roll out to China, you know, they're not concerned of any of their proprietary software getting stolen, anything like that. So that's what he's going through in that video there. What stood out to me is he said Elon Musk wanted this software, the software that communicates with all of their suppliers, everything from their website to the back end to Tesla Energy. He wanted it all created in 4 weeks. And Tesla has this internal team. It's called the quality assurance team. And so the quality assurance team is a team of, I believe, 40 engineers that work on the back end. And they developed this software in 4 weeks. And so that's what he's mentioning there in that video. And so that caused me to kind of do some investigating. I was curious. How did 40 engineers develop this software, this internal software? They call it Warp, by the way, in 4 weeks. Because they've said, I mean, you could read it anywhere. Companies, organizations spend millions and millions of dollars developing ERP softwares and years and years. And in the video, Jay says that exact thing, that companies spend years trying to create a software like this. So how is Tesla, with a team of 40 engineers, able to do this? It made no sense to me. So I did a little bit of, digging, and the whole theory starts from Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. So Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, as we all know, founded PayPal together. They were co-founders, and so they had a great relationship. Peter Thiel, in the video or in his book, raves about Tesla, brilliant business model. This is basically what you want to look for. There's only two companies that have this business model in the world, and it's Palantir and Tesla. Anyway, they know each other from PayPal. They sold PayPal. Peter Thiel went off to go found Palantir. Elon Musk went off to go found Tesla and SpaceX. Now, Peter Thiel was more of a silent investor, and he also was a venture capitalist. So Peter Thiel invested into both SpaceX and Tesla. And so it would be advantageous for Peter Thiel, if he believes in Palantir's software and the value that it brings, to pitch it to Musk and say, hey, I know this software, I'm developing it over here. It can create a ton of value for you. I know you want to create something internally. It really just makes sense. It mitigates Thiel's risk for Tesla and his SpaceX investment, which is essentially what they're doing now. They're investing. Palantir's investing in pre-IPO companies that is using Palantir software. So Palantir is mitigating the risk, and so that's where that comes in. So not only is Thiel an investor in SpaceX and Tesla, that's where that makes sense. If you understand Palantir's business model and how they want to be a platform business that allows companies to create their own software for their specific industry and then sublease that software they created out. And so Tesla's not concerned about developing software on top of Palantir's platform, because it's going to do everything that Tesla wants. It's going to provide the security. It's going to allow them to create the software in an insanely fast time, which Alex Karp has said multiple times. That was their value pitch. Create a software in a fraction of the time for a fraction of the cost. And then it would allow Tesla to go and sublease it if they wanted to. And if you look back on a couple earnings calls, I don't know when it was from, but you'll hear Elon Musk say that he isn't opposed to subleasing out Warp software to other competitors. Anyway, in the book, it goes on to say, he goes on to compliment Palantir, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, a lot of people, whenever I heard this brought up, they were like, Thiel and Musk know each other from the PayPal mafia. Of course they would be working together, but that is the best explanation as to why they would be working together that I have heard, other than just throwing out that they know each other. I mean, that doesn't necessarily confirm anything. But also, you were saying the part about the engineers and them not possibly being able to do 200 man years of work with a team of 25. That could not be more true because of how notoriously late Musk is with all of his projects. So especially Full Self-Driving, there's no way that the team would be more efficient than 10 times than anyone else in the world. especially when you consider the track record with teams and software. Of course, I have full confidence in the Tesla team to be able to create something like this if they wanted to from scratch. It would just take much, much longer. And that does point to the theory that they just were willing to integrate Foundry. Teal either pitched it to them or they had already known about it. And they just went about building off of that instead of starting from scratch, especially with a sharp deadline that Musk, it looks like he put on the team.
To touch on that, where this information comes from is Tesla's quality assurance team is a team of, I believe, 40 engineers now out of their 50,000 employees. Of the 40, 9 of them have the ability to create applications on top of the software and basically change the code. Not too long ago, I believe it was the beginning of last year, they hired an employee on to be one of the software engineers of the quality assurance team. And he ended up stealing lines of code of Tesla's Warp software. And I think he'd only worked there for like 3 days. Anyway, he ended up transferring this code to his Dropbox. And of course, Tesla caught him. So they sued, Tesla sued this guy. In the case, they said that the value of their software is equivalent to 200 man years is what they've spent developing the Warp software. And so that doesn't add up if you look on the time frame, because they developed the software in 4 months. So yeah, that's what it was, 4 months, not 1 month, 4 months. And they only had a team of 25 working on it. So I think, and you've seen Palantir advertise this before, the cumulative R&D spent on their platform. And so I think that's what basically that was what Tesla was saying is, hey, this is how much value, and that's all it can mean is, hey, all of these engineers from Palantir have spent, time developing that. That's the only case. There's no way 25 guys in 4 months did what 200, men did. It's just, there's no way it didn't add up. So
yeah, that's huge. That's huge. It's also a clever way of winning the legal battle, to tie in what they have paid for access to, being Foundry. So definitely clever on their part to try and win the lawsuit by any means necessary. But also it does give us this hint, necessarily building on top of something else. If they have just such a small team and it actually was worth that much time, considering time is money, and they nearly lost their trade secrets and intellectual property were stolen. So yeah, that is actually a very salient point. So if you don't have anything else to add, we can kind of talk about this leak with the Tesla Model S test drive for employees. So did you have any thoughts on that? A lot of people were saying it could have just been a mistake, but I have no idea how it would be a mistake. It was the real website, and it was the Chinese site, I believe, but it could have just been the event. Obviously, it was in English. I showed this in my videos. It got posted very many other places, but I'm just wondering your thoughts on that. They don't come out and say we have a partnership with each other, but I've never seen Tesla do something like that, and it would only kind of indicate that to be true. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so my thoughts on that, I guess, are in Alex Karp's most recent interview, he was giving the retail investors a lot of credit for the research and the due diligence that they do, scraping Indeed job postings. And so he knows the retail investor does a lot of due diligence. Tesla is an insanely popular with the retail investors is stock. It's just a retail investors, safe haven. Every retail investor invests in Tesla. So it just, I think it was a subtle hint for us retail investors to, kind of run with. It's also a clever marketing, ploy. If you look in Thiel's book, that's kind of what he plays onto. If you'll notice, Tesla they don't advertise. Elon Musk just says a bunch of things and gets a bunch of attention, and that attention, creates a lot of conversation around Palantir. And so I don't know if it signals a partnership. I personally think it does. And I don't think that necessarily is a reason for it, but I think they're just subtly dropping little hints that, hey, yes, this partnership is real, because the competitors, Tesla's competitors, GM, Ford, all of them, they're not paying attention to where the Model S can be test driven at. They're not, but the retail investor is, and because they love Tesla.
I love that. And also, here's a tweet from Jake pointing out that
Yeah,
they dropped this hint, and this is where I think I actually, or maybe it's on the tweet before, but anyway, I do think this is pointing to the fact that they're dropping these hints because if Tesla, SpaceX, any of these larger companies don't actually want to disclose the partnership to be able to protect their advantage, which is perhaps the most bullish thing there could possibly be said, as you said earlier, about Palantir. Maybe they do want to slightly hint at this. They're not going to come directly outright and say it, but it's pretty close to saying something.
I want to add something there. And this is going to bring us back to, you open the whole conversation by asking, hey, when do they announce partnerships, right? And one reason why a company might not want to announce the relationship is because they're not in the scale phase yet. And so if they can't sublease their software, or if they view their competitive advantage as the moat not as big enough yet, or it could still grow, then they may not want to release it. Now, Tesla may be comfortable releasing these subtle hints right now to us because maybe they're closer to getting to the scale phase, and maybe they feel that the moat is big enough now where they can release these subtle hints. And maybe it's pure speculation here, but it might be closer to the third phase where they can sublease that software out, and then we might see them release that partnership officially sometime in the near future.
I think that would catapult the stock, but then again, we're not condoning any kind of trading in that regard because there is very little information as to when, if ever, this would be made publicly available. But I don't think Tesla would necessarily be afraid to let people know about this because they're the ones open sourcing their patents. They want others to be following their footsteps and doing as well as they can. But it is perhaps on the line of it being an advantage, whereas other automakers just kind of struggle with their operational computing, as maybe a patent is not the same kind of thing. But anyways, I did see some good comments pushing back on a partnership announcement because of Tesla being in China and how that might hurt the company a little bit, especially with the Chinese government. But I'm not sure. So what were you thinking about that potentially being a reason at all?
Yeah, that's actually a great point. And here's the reason I don't agree with it. Tesla typically businesses, in order for them to do business in China, they have to sign into a partnership, like a joint venture arm with a local company in China. And that is the only way that they can get access to the China's economy, typically. And there's a lot of hesitancy for companies to do that, because when you sign a joint venture with, a company in China, basically all of your IP, they now have access to. And theoretically, if companies there in China have access to it, then the government has access to it, because it's part of the law that the government, and I believe, not to get political, but I believe it's part of the law in China that if the government needs access to a technology that is commercially available for war, for something like that, then they can pull. Now, Tesla is the only company that I am aware of that did not have to sign into a joint venture because China wanted Tesla to come there so bad. And so that is more of a reason for Tesla to want to work with Palantir, because Palantir, their whole focus is security and allowing companies to build on top of their platform. Security is one of the biggest reasons for companies to join the ecosystem. If you have a secure platform, then companies are going to feel more comfortable joining the ecosystem. So that would be more of a reason for Tesla to want to use Palantir's software, and more of a reason for Palantir to want to work with Tesla, because they don't want what a lot of people view as the United States' most valuable company losing their IP to China. And so that's just my opinion on it.
Yes, some very good points there. And yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think there are some people that still think that China might overstep their bounds in order to help the electric vehicle companies there, which is a threat. You're in the country. I guess they can do whatever they feel is necessary. But I know Elon felt very strongly about being the first and currently, I believe, only wholly owned factory in China. So that's great. Something I did not consider. Palantir is not afraid to get geopolitical with who they work with, and China, of course, is not in a list, is on the list with who they are partnering with on the government side. So let's see what else. I did just want to point out something funny here, which is the fact that Joe Lonsdale actually has Elon in it. If you combine the first and last name, pointless, but a
That's
little
pretty cool, actually.
yeah, a little Easter egg, if you will. Partnership confirmed, not really, but
Hey,
so yeah, another thing you brought up, SpaceX led into it really well about Teal being the connection between Palantir and Elon Musk, and Elon, of course, being the CEO of SpaceX. I also had the thought that Palantir is now partnered with the FAA, and the FAA has to work with SpaceX, and the FAA also has to. Well, here, let me just read what I wrote down about Apollo potentially being. This is something I was talking about with Jake Yu yesterday, a lock-in mechanism and really sticky and retaining all sorts of clients commercially. So I said Apollo will ultimately offer a bridge for the connection between multiple different organizations to kind of daisy chain controlled data. So the example being for airlines that they must use Foundry to allow interface to and from the FAA. So that's more of an airline thing, and that could potentially in the future be huge for Palantir if one government branch adopts Gotham or Foundry. It's Foundry in the case of the FAA, and then maybe every airline in the United States has to then be able to attach to that, and Apollo reading and writing the data, connecting to that could be a lock in there. So what do you think about that?
oh, I think you just explained the reason why ecosystems and the platform business model, an inverted platform business model, is so insanely brilliant. Because if the theory is correct that SpaceX is using Palantir software, right? One of the reasons for people to use Palantir software and the idea behind Palantir, Palantir's platforms is they want the whole ecosystem to come in and use Palantir software. And they believe that when you go to these communities, SpaceX, and they have existing communities that the partners, the different nodes are going to join and use Palantir software as well. So, that could be why we're seeing FAA, now using Palantir software, because SpaceX pitched them on the value of using Palantir's software platform. And I think you're absolutely correct. That could be another node. You could look at Skywise. Skywise already has a relationship with the 140 airlines. So 140 airlines are already using Palantir software. So how easy would it be for these 140 airlines to integrate with the FAA, who's now using Palantir software? And it's just more attractive for the FAA to want to even use Palantir software when they consider the 140 airlines are using it already as well. So like, not only was SpaceX saying, hey, FAA, come join and use Palantir software, but it was also the 140 airlines. And so that there's more value, more of a reason for people to join. Like Facebook, the more people that join that, it's more valuable for you. And so that's why Palantir is just going to scale beyond people's wildest imaginations, in my opinion.
That's huge. And I just put out a tweet yesterday just to kind of wrap up the idea here, which was Elon wasn't able to launch the SpaceX rocket because the FAA said an aircraft was too close to the launch pad there. So I was just thinking maybe Palantir needs to help them out. and get that straight. Sorry about the background noise there. But anyway, yeah, that's great. The network effect, I hadn't even thought of that, which is kind of what I was leading into. But aside from the ecosystem lock-in, which we are now discussing, there's also the network effect, as you were saying, which we've seen exemplified from so many social networks. You brought up the Facebook idea. If many companies want to work together, they're each using one of Palantir's products, it's going to be very hard not to connect. But at the same time, Palantir, Apollo at least, reads and writes all different kinds of data. So I think they are more accessible rather than give the example of Apple's ecosystem, kind of locking everyone else out. You can't use iMessage on an Android device, for instance. So I think Palantir is going to be more accessible in that regard. In the future, they could change that.
Can I share a video that I
Yeah,
think
sure.
will, let's see, how do I do it here?
Quick picture of what I'm talking about. So everyone is familiar with a hierarchical supply chain where there's an original equipment manufacturer at the top and different tiers of suppliers. Innovation comes through this way, but it's really contracted for. But what we've seen with industry platforms is this more amorphous network of partners, customers, and complementers. And I'll define what we mean by that, all surrounding a particular product or technology that serves as the mechanism to bring these different market actors or market sides together.
Yeah, so this video, basically what it's going over, it's going over network effects that are caused from an ecosystem. And you hit the nail on the head where Apple's ecosystem, they limit the API integration, and they do it for a couple of reasons. Their main one is security. Palantir, they pride themselves at being very modular, having a very open API system. So yes, it won't limit the potential marketplace, whereas Apple is limiting the amount of nodes or connections that an ecosystem can have. And so that's just one example of how Palantir is going to be potentially even better than the ecosystem Apple's developed, or the marketplace they developed, I guess you can call it. But yes, it's very similar to Facebook and the telephone, for example. Metcalfe's law: the more people that have a telephone makes it more valuable for the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, and another, speaking of network effects, Bitcoin and currencies being a network effect eventually, once the adoption kind of speeds up there. Thinking about this, Tesla is one of the first companies to, and I know this is a hot topic, but I'm not trying to say one way or the other whether Elon is making the right decision here, but just taking it from an objective standpoint, Tesla being one of the first companies, the biggest company, I believe, to have bought Bitcoin and hold it on the balance sheet. And then we have Palantir saying they will now, or in the future, I think they said they're committing to accepting Bitcoin as payment. So I was just thinking, you have one of the biggest companies in the world potentially using Foundry. And I use the word potentially because we don't have an official confirmation. But so far in this discussion, I've been even more convinced. And then we have another company that is actually supplying that service, willing to accept Bitcoin as payment. While that may not happen in the near term, I do think the exchange of Bitcoin is going to get normalized, and that could perhaps be one of the first transactions if there is indeed a link there. And the network effect, just to build off of what you're saying, Bitcoin in general will continue to expand. But yeah, what do you think about that being one of the first business-to-business transactions?
So as far as Tesla accepting Bitcoin, they did develop that integration into their software insanely fast. You didn't see anyone else really innovating to accept, Bitcoin. It's just more of a testament to the value of an in-house innovation platform. Whether or not Tesla's using Palantir software or not, it just shows you the value of the rapid ability to innovate and to change. And so it kind of, if you looked into like the Cellularity contract and our partnership, Cellularity is using Palantir software, right? And Cellularity's already integrated multiple different blockchains into their software. I think the value's there. I think that's what's going to cause some businesses to go under, because businesses that are using old platforms, ERP systems that cannot innovate like a lot of companies are going to be able to, then they're just going to be obsolete. They're not going to be competitive. If we do move to crypto, and it transitions fast, because technology adoption is only accelerating. So if crypto gets adopted and it happens fast, then if companies can't innovate and start accepting it, then they're going to get left behind. And so that just increases the value for Palantir. I don't know if that answered your question though.
No, I may not have been clear, but that's a good point about that being why a company would want to adopt Foundry, being the pace of innovation. But I was simply saying, if Palantir is accepting Bitcoin as payment and Tesla has Bitcoin on its balance sheet for payment, they could be paying Palantir in Bitcoin if they choose to. And I kind of rambled on by saying the network effect and blah, blah, blah. But that's what I was saying. If Tesla is one of the first companies potentially using Palantir to own Bitcoin, they could choose to pay Palantir in Bitcoin. I'm not saying they're likely going to do it. They said they want to hold on to their Bitcoin position, but I just made that connection there.
That is a good connection. And honestly, it might be interesting, but yeah, I think you're right. They said they wanted to hold on. And I know the tax laws with Bitcoin is a little weird because it's viewed as an asset instead of currency. So if they were to buy something with it and they had a profit, then they would have to pay taxes on the gains.
This has been great. I know you wanted to share some AT&T stuff. We've gone here. You can definitely pull it up. Yeah, we could do it another time. I think this is probably a good stopping point, especially for this whole Tesla discussion. It's been really educational for me, at least. I hope many others find it educational as well. It's clear you've done a lot of research. Pull up your Twitter account for some closing thoughts to be sure everyone can be following you here at Palantir_Daily, of course. And if you are not already following Palantir Daily, you must follow. One of the few, I will say, for Palantir Twitter, but definitely let's just take a look at this. Zoom out. This is your pinned tweet right here. We intend to broaden our reach through partnerships that establish our platforms as the central operating system for entire industries. And I can think of no better way of demonstrating that than Tesla pioneering many industries. Actually, just one last question before we close off here. We've heard a lot about Wejo, the work they're doing, but I actually think that Tesla is keeping all of their autonomous work perhaps separate from any sort of Palantir stuff. I just think it's separate. What do you think about the full self-driving neural networks, training and stuff like that?
I don't know what to think of it. Initially, yes, I do think it is separate. But as of recent, Karp said in one of his interviews that Edge AI is something that they're working on. I don't know near as much as like James. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but James Dama. I don't know. I don't think they are, but Karp said recently they're working on Edge AI and different AI uses. So who knows? Maybe they are assisting behind the curtain. I don't know. I don't think so, but
personally, I think that's probably something more separate from Palantir. But if they are in talks, I think that would definitely be something to come after the in-house ERP, as we discussed. This has been great. Thank you very much for coming on here. I think this is probably some of the best information you can get on this topic right here that we just discussed. I think this is huge for Palantir, huge if true, as they say, being the sole demonstration of Palantir's strength and that what they've been working on developing for their software over the past 17 years and why they deserve a high multiple, why we have been buying the stock. We're not going to tell you what to do, but why it really means so much for these businesses. So yeah, I'll just leave it there. Any closing thoughts on your end?
Thank you for having me. Again, this is all just my opinion, not financial advice. Really, I created the account just to learn from the community. So, follow me, start conversation with me. I'm learning too. So yeah, just happy to be involved and hopefully I add some value.